How does Apple iOS keep your apps secure and keep apps from hacking other apps? And the answer is every app that is released by Apple or that is on the iTunes store has to have a digital signature. And the digital signature is presented through a certificate that is issued by Apple. So the phone only trusts apps that bear the signature. And we have, as before, the flash memory, which we're going to call the file system. We're looking at this from a logical, a software perspective now, not a hardware perspective. So anytime an app needs to store data in the file system, the iOS generates a random space for it to store the data. The app can't actually talk to the file system directly. It can only talk to iOS, and iOS talks to the file system. So the apps don't know where their data is physically stored. They can only request their data through iOS. They can't request data that belongs to another app. They can't request user data. They don't even know that it exists. And of course, this is all enforced by the Secure Enclave. Now, what if you go out and buy a shiny new pair of headphones? Well, there's an integrated circuit in the phone. That's another chip that manages external devices. So if you connect a non-Apple headphone, you only get analog audio and you only get serial control of the phone. You can adjust things like the volume, for example. But if you buy something that's made for Apple, you get digital audio and full access. And that's because the made for Apple device has a digital signature built in, which is recognized by the integrated circuit. Now, another popular technology is HomeKit, which allows you to control different things in your house, like curtains and light switches and doorbells through your phone. And the way that it works is you buy a HomeKit module or a device, and that device interacts with your iPhone. And again, HomeKit devices have a digital signature so that iOS can authenticate them. And HomeKit uses station-to-station encryption, and it also uses NIST elliptical curve cryptography to encrypt its data, which it stores on the iOS. HomeKit generates its own encryption key to encrypt the data. The data is not actually accessible to the phone, but it is backed up to iCloud. And if you have family members and they also want control of the HomeKit devices, then the HomeKit data can sync to their phones as well. Now, the other option, of course, is you can control your HomeKit devices from work. You can even go to France or whatever and say that you want to dim the lights. And the way that that works is HomeKit can talk directly to iCloud, and it uses again the elliptic curve cryptography to do so. All the devices have encryption keys, including the HomeKit devices and the iOS devices, which communicate with the iCloud. So you can control light switches through your phone simply by sending a command to iCloud. What Apple says, of course, is that the data is randomized so that Apple doesn't know what kind of command you're sending through iCloud or even what kind of HomeKit device you have. So Apple can see data, but they don't know if you're heating up your swimming pool or turning the temperature down in your living room. They've got no idea. Now, Siri is very interesting because when you talk to Siri, Siri talks to iOS, and it also talks to the apps that are on your phone. The question is, what kind of data does Siri give a particular app? Well, that depends on the app permissions. So if you give an app permission to see your photos or your contacts or your text messages, then Siri will give them that data when required. But if you don't give an app those permissions, then Siri will refuse to provide that data. And as we said earlier, an app can't see your data unless the iOS provides it. When you talk to Siri, Siri takes a lot of that data, gives it to iOS, and iOS hands it over to Apple. Of course, this communication is encrypted with HTTPS, and the kinds of data that Apple receives are your first and last name, your GPS coordinates, and your recorded voice and relevant data. The first and last name are kept indefinitely, so when you first set up Siri, it's got your first and last name. It's only when you deactivate Siri that those are deleted. GPS coordinates are deleted after 10 minutes of inactivity, which could be never if you keep moving your phone around. Your recorded voice and relevant data stay with Apple for 6 months, and the kinds of relevant data that get sent depend on the command that you give Siri. So if you tell Siri to access a contact or a text message, then that data gets transmitted. Of course, the session itself is created through a random identifier that doesn't identify you specifically, or so they say.